Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? Today's first encounter. This encounter still bothers me to this day. I was in high school at the time, and it was around 1 in the morning on a Saturday. Myself and my best friend were just hanging out playing some League at the house when we got a call from our friend who was a little too drunk at a party and needed to get picked up. Whatever, we're sober and he's gotten us before, so we set out. We pick him up and throw him in the back seat and begin our journey home. We live out in the country, so it's a bit foggy and there are no other cars on the road. When all of a sudden, as we come around this corner, we see it. This animal, or thing, a ball of reddish-brown fur, just hunched over in a ditch on the side of the road. I thought at first maybe it was an injured bear or a big-ass wolf, so I slowed down to a creep and blasted the high beams. This thing proceeds to turn its head and look right at us. Beady red eyes, pointed ears, and a snout like a wolf. I can't look away from this thing as our drunken friend is rolling around in the back completely unaware. This thing then stands up on 2 legs and turns its face to us. It looks dead ass like a werewolf vampire mix, fangs poking out of its mouth, long pointed ears covered in this long reddish brown fur that's thinner on its chest and the midsection. It's taller than the street sign next to it, and it's still in the ditch. Easily 8 or 9 feet. It's lanky as hell, but still I can see some muscle definition. It's just staring at us. I glance over at my buddy in the passenger seat, and he's sunken way down, shaking. Just saying, drive, 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 dude, just please drive. Jake, drive. I turn my head back and decide if I'm going to run this thing over. This thing gets down on all fours and bounds across the field next to it at a breakneck pace. And I just sit there stunned. I snap out of it and drive home. Now I'm questioning if I go on to be one of those crazy Bigfoot people and spend the rest of my life hunting this thing. Nobody ever believes me when I tell them the story, but I can still call my buddy up and ask, "What the fuck did we see that night, dude?" And he immediately knows what I'm talking about. So yeah, now I spend 90% of my time in the forest and outdoors for my job, always knowing that shit like that really does exist and is out there. Today's second encounter. This experience takes place in Texas in December of 2018. Weeks leading up to this incident, my mom noticed a hand. The hand had a lot of fur and claws at the end of each finger. It looked like the mix between a human hand and a dog paw. My mom saw it clawing and scratching at the window. She went back to sleep and didn't think too much of it. And there was a curtain at the window, so she didn't see anything else that night. A couple of nights later, I woke up randomly. When I woke up, I noticed thick fur of something. I rubbed my eyes to make sure of what I saw. I looked through the spaces of the curtain and saw a werewolf-like creature, 6 to 7 feet tall. I remember it looked like the head of a husky, and the fur was thick. The color of this thing was dark gray, brown, and red. This werewolf creature had pointed ears with some white on them, and had ice blue-colored eyes. I was very intrigued by this werewolf, dogman, whatever. I didn't feel scared or threatened in any way. I felt the werewolf was curious and had muscles all over its body. It had abs and was on its hind legs. It stood up like a human. I did feel I was hypnotized for some reason, and I'm not sure if he saw me. I do say he because I felt like it was a he, not a she. Hard to explain. I did feel like this creature with the blue eyes was coming back to see me again. I never did see it again, but yeah, I felt like I knew those eyes, like I've seen them somewhere. I know, it's strange. A week later, I woke up to howls. In the area I live, you don't usually hear coyotes or wolves. Then I checked my phone to see the time was 3:30. I thought that was an odd time to hear howls so deep. The howls were so deep the ground felt like it was shaking a little. Then I heard something horrible. I heard a poor dog being torn apart by giant werewolf beasts. They were at least in a 4-pack. They sounded big. The howls kept going. The poor little dog was crying and yelping as it was being eaten. I was so scared to look outside, but it didn't seem that close, maybe a mile away. My mom heard the howling and the dog being ripped apart alive, and the poor dog crying and yelping. My dad was deep asleep. The neighbors had heard them as well, and my next-door neighbor were young people who drink at parties and go out late, things like that. So they were about to leave and open the door. I heard them scream, and one said, "Go back inside." I heard another door shut and locked it up. I'm not sure what scared them, but they don't usually get scared easily. I heard another neighbor from downstairs talking on the phone, saying crazy things like something happened that night. He kept saying the stories you hear when you're young aren't just stories, it's real. He said he can't sleep at night. I don't live in the countryside. I live near a mall. Stores are nearby. There's some spaces between with trees and some space of land that I've seen cattle in the area of the land with fences. Luckily, I've never seen any more werewolves, and I've never seen coyotes in the area or any of that. I still hear howls from time to time, but I hear it miles and miles away. It's weird. I do hear them from far away. I know it. I just wanted to share this story because it's something I never expected to happen. Those screams from that poor dog. It's something I don't ever want to hear again. These next 3 encounters are all connected. This happened while I was growing up. 2004, maybe 2005. I was about 13 years old. It took place in a rural area a good ways outside of the town of Uvalde, Texas. The town itself was really small back then and not much to look at. It's just one of those towns that really isn't on the way to anywhere important. My father knew someone who owned a deer lease that was about 1,000 acres down outside of that area and was complaining about a ton of hog that was tearing up the land. Being open season on hog in the south, my dad thought he'd surprise me that summer and take me down for a week to go hunting for them. Not only did it help him with networking for his job, but it also gave us some quality father-son time. I remember the drive down there from Dallas was torture. It was about 7 hours in my dad's hardtop Jeep Wrangler. The car was so uncomfy, I hated it. All I had to do was either stare out the window or try to beat Super Mario Land 2 on my Game Boy Pocket, something I was never able to accomplish in my youth. The drive obviously took most of the day. So we got there in early evening. The owner of the land had told my dad that he hadn't had anyone else lease it for at least a year, and the cabin in the property might be a little rough and dusty. I didn't really care at this point in my life. I had been in scouts for a couple of years and spent a lot of my free time in the woods or fishing with friends. Needless to say, I was pretty comfortable roughing it. So, after unlocking the gate and driving to the cabin on the land, we settled in. The cabin was pretty rough and dusty and dirt everywhere, flies. I remember that it looked like some raccoons had gotten in the cabin and crapped on the floor. After cleaning up a bit and getting the sleeping bags out, then settled up the cots, we decided to get some sleep. Something about that night was weird. I never was able to get comfortable enough to fall asleep or any restful amount. I couldn't put my finger on why, but I had a feeling like I was being watched. I was finally able to drift off for what I guess was maybe an hour. When we woke up, it was early, 7 in the morning. We decided to scout around the land for tracks and signs of the hogs and find a good place to set up the blind. It was summer and horribly hot in the afternoon, so morning was the best time to be out and about. After walking for maybe an hour or so, we came to an area of trees, lightly dense, and lucky found some signs of hog. Typical torn-up ground where they had been rooting, so we followed them into the trees. I was looking for more signs when my dad stopped me with his arm. I remember looking up and seeing someone standing about 50 yards away. Some of their body was blocked by the trees. This was private land, so they definitely are not supposed to be there. We also had confirmation from the owner before we got to the lease that nobody was there, not to mention the gate was locked up when we first arrived. The person was wearing some bright-colored red jacket. We slowly walked toward them. My dad called out something like, "Hey, we're hunters. This is private land." The person didn't move at all. They were dead still. We were about 30 yards away and could see that he was turned away from us with his hands in his pocket. Weird thing was that the person was in a ski jacket and what looked to be ski pants. Now this is Texas in the summer. It's about 98 outside by then. My dad called out again and no reaction. He told me to stay behind him and unsnapped the clip on his pistol holster. That's all we had at the time since we were only scouting the area. The rifles were back at the cabin. We approached the person's right side, and then my dad told me to stay put 20 yards away. I stayed and crouched down, watched him circle around to the form of the man while talking to him and asking if he was okay. He finally passed around to the front of him, and my dad stood straight up with a confused look on his face. I called out and said, "Dad, what's wrong?" He called back and said, "It's a mannequin." I walked over to it while my dad stood there staring, and as I got closer, one thing stood out the most. The clothes it was wearing were brand new. No dust, sap, bird droppings, or signs of being outside for any more than a day at most. At that moment, I looked at my dad and could see him getting worried. Almost immediately after, I felt that feeling again, like we were being watched. I knew my dad felt it as well. I wanted to start crying. I remember feeling suddenly so scared. My dad whispered, "We're leaving, and right now." He grabbed my hand and drew his pistol. He scanned the area the whole way back while I was holding back tears. We got back as fast as we could. I was terrified, so it felt like it took forever. But in reality, it was probably 45 minutes max. After returning, we packed up and beat feet. We drove back home that day and didn't talk much on the way home. I remember right after we left, my dad called his buddy, the owner of the land, and he was confused. He said that he would go check it out next week while he was in the area. He also said that he had never had any issue with people because of his property was high fenced. My dad normally isn't a paranoid person, but me being young and the lease possibly having someone there that we didn't know about, he decided to be cautious and just get the hell out of there. After we got back home, we talked, and my dad wasn't able to sleep the night before as well. He had the same feeling, but didn't want to wake me up because he thought I was sleeping too. Turns out, the next week he got a call from his buddy. He had checked the whole property and never found any traces of anyone, no mannequin or anything. That story still makes the hair stand on end. No idea what that was, but the paranoid man in me thinks it was some kind of trap or something. Not the creepiest thing that happened to me in the woods, but definitely in the top 3. This happened to me and my buddy when we were at college during the winter of 2010. I was and still am an outdoorsy kind of guy who has been at home in the woods for a very long time. I've seen and heard a lot, but never had an experience like this. I met my buddy at college that first semester, and we became fast friends. Before I knew it, he was inviting me back to his family's place for the winter to stay there and do a bit of hog hunting. Now, I've hunted hogs since I was old enough to hunt, so I jumped on the chance. We got to his parents' place, and holy hell, it was beautiful. They own about 1,500 acres out in rural West Texas. His family raise and show and sell cattle, and they're loaded. They're amazing people, and they kind of took me in like a second son over the time in college. I visited them a lot, but since his family are avid hunters and the land they live on is mainly for cattle, they own another 1,000 acres they lease to hunters and also use it themselves to hunt on. So after a day or two at their primary ranch, we set out to the hunting lease. It's just me and my buddy. No hunters had leased it for the winter. We set up our stuff at the little hunting cabin they had, set our alarms to wake up at around 6 in the morning. We got some rest and woke up early, ready to head out. Us being wild college kids, we brought the whiskey and coke and our rifles. Spare me the lectures. We were stupid college kids. We got to the stand after a short hike through the cold and hopped on up to the stand. It was one of those big green metal stands that's elevated 15 to 20 feet in the air. The area it's set up facing was perfect. To the left, about 100 yards, was the most cliché rock clearing with trees lining it and dead cactus. In front of us was a wider clearing with sparse trees and various weeds and grass. To the right was a densely populated patch of trees, and behind us was a dense patch of trees as well, and a high fence about 30 yards back. We couldn't see behind us because the blind he had was only a 180-degree view. Just a back wall and a door with a window that was boarded up because the glass, or whatever, had been broken. We had just set up our chairs, started drinking, and waiting began. We had a beautiful view of the area and the sunrise coming from the east of where we were. We didn't see anything the first hour, so we kept drinking and talking. About an hour after the sun rose, we started hearing some limbs breaking and brush rustling from behind us. Sounded a good ways back, maybe 50 yards or more. We readied our rifles, hoping that we were certain hogs would circle us. I remember sitting there, just waiting, watching the fog from my breath for a good 5 minutes. The rustling got closer, then I noticed a really metallic smell. The best way I can describe it is the smell crappy tools give off when you don't take care of them. Kind of like a mix of copper, vomit, and poop. I looked at my buddy and whispered, "Do you smell that?" He nodded and shrugged his shoulders. A minute later, we're still waiting. The rustling seems to be getting closer. Then it just kind of stops. After a couple of minutes, I could still smell the stink, but no noise, and figured maybe a couple hog had taken a dump near the stand and moved on. I reached to pick up a bottle as my buddy puts his rifle down, and just as we're doing that, we hear this scream, kind of grunt sound. Now, I've never heard anything like it. It was like a low grunt that escalated into a gravelly scream, and it sounded like it was right outside the back of the blind. Before we could ever really react, we heard a bunch of twigs and branches snapping. It sounded like it was right outside the back of the blind. Not a couple seconds after, we feel the entire blind shake about 3 times, like if a car had bumped into it. I dropped the bottle of whiskey and just looked at my friend, and he just looked as freaked out as I felt. We heard a loud, singular grunt, and then the sound of twigs and branches breaking again, slowly getting quieter. We just sat there, too freaked out to move for what felt like an hour, but was really only 10 minutes. I don't know if it was the whiskey or just me trying to be brave, but I got up and opened the door and there was nothing there. We climbed down and had our rifles ready. We both knew it wasn't a hog, but tried to convince ourselves that it was. We could see the old stand marks on the ground, and the whole stand had been rocked forward about 6 inches. There was a bent portion of one of the metal struts, and 2 big depressions, where it looked like feet had dug into the rocky ground. We figured whatever it was stood there whole while it was rocking the stand. We stood there looking dumbfounded, and we just decided to get the hell out of there. We drove back to the main house and told his dad. He said to stay at their house with them for the night, and we'd go back and check it out tomorrow. When we got there the day after, we saw the same things that were there the prior day. And his dad was super confused. I don't think he initially believed us when we told him about what had happened. When we found wherever it was had come from, there was a clear path in the grass leading away from the stand. Where it had been depressed, you could see tree limbs broken. The highest one was broken off about 7 feet from the ground. We walked back 30 yards to the high fence that was there, and sure enough, about a 4-foot wide section had been mangled and bent down. His dad was pissed, obviously, but he was also really confused. He told us that he had never had this happen, and reckons it was just a giant hog, but I never thought so. I don't want to say it was a Bigfoot, but I have never had an explanation as to what it could have been. Over the years, I've grown to believe in Bigfoot more and more. My dad had an encounter with what he claims could have been a Bigfoot as well. Maybe it runs in the family. This is my dad's encounter. This happened in the late 70s, as far as my dad can remember. Maybe around 78, 79, when he was a teen out hunting in the woods with his friend. This was a ways out from Meridian, Texas, on a fall evening. My father and his friends spent a lot of time messing around in the woods, doing typical teen stuff. Firing off bottle rockets, hunting coon, underage drinking sometimes, but this day they were going hunting for squirrel. So they set out. My dad grabbed his .22. It was just a basic Ruger or something, with a cheap scope on it. His friend had a really badass Weinreimer that wasn't scared of anything. They would run up to bulls and chase them. He would get in scraps with bobcats, and he would chase off raccoons. He was walking along with them in the woods that day. He said that there was an old creek bed they would always go mess around in, so that's where they started. The walls of the creek bed were about 5 to 6 feet high, so they hopped down into it and casually walked along, half-heartedly looking at the trees and such. All of a sudden, my dad said the Weinreimer started whimpering and wouldn't go any further. It hung back about 10 feet from them, refusing to continue no matter what they said. A few seconds later, he said that it tucked its tail and ran off back in the direction of the house. This made him confused, but they still shrugged it off. They took a couple of steps further, and he said that up ahead, about 60 yards, the creek bed took a hard right and elevated up on the banks were some trees. Now the sun was setting behind those trees, and beyond those couple of trees was an open field, so you could see the sun setting relatively clear. His friend stopped him and said, "Hey, Do you see that?" and pointed in the direction of one of the trees. Now my dad said that he could see an outline of something big and seemingly hairy behind the tree peeking out at them. They weren't sure what it was, so they called out, "Hey, we're just hunting, are we cool?" No response or movement. My dad thought maybe it was some sort of huge porcupine, not uncommon in the area. He held up his rifle and looked through the scope to try and figure out what it was. Since the sun was setting behind whatever it was hard for him to see any detail due to the sunlight. But my dad told me what he could see freaked him out. He said that all he could make out was large black fur, covered head, and shoulder peeking out. As he was looking at it, what he described was a large monkey-like hand grabbed the tree of the trunk. My dad froze, and his friend asked him what he saw. My dad just shook his head and handed his buddy the rifle. His friend saw it as well and was freaked out equally. They sat there for a minute just staring at it, both of them and whatever the creature was not moving. My dad has always said that he didn't know what came over him, maybe just teenage balls, but he suggested they go check it out. Both he and his friend chambered up on the left side of the embankment, and when they got to the top, the creature had ducked back behind the tree. They slowly approached and circled around the tree, my dad keeping the rifle ready. He always said that he didn't know why, because that small of caliber wouldn't have done much of anything against something that big. They both circled around the tree, and turned out that there was nothing there. It was just gone. They didn't know where something that big could have run off to in such a short amount of time without them seeing it, but nonetheless, they checked the area just to see if they could find any signs of what it was. Turns out they found 2 impressions where it would have been standing, but due to the fall leaf litter, there wasn't any definition to the tracks. He did say that whatever it was big and heavy. The tracks were about 12 to 14 inches in length. Then they went on to say that they estimated the creature to be about 8 feet tall at most. Other than tracks, there was nothing else found. No smell, no fur, no additional tracks. Nothing in the tree itself. Nothing. Afterward, he said they decided to just go back to the house. They really never mentioned it to anyone or each other after that. My dad does love the paranormal, but he is a healthy skeptic when it comes to this stuff. That event, he says, made him a believer in Bigfoot. And after having my own encounter, I've come to believe in some things as well. I'm not saying it's a Bigfoot, but I think something is out there that has not been explained.
There you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this night-ending bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting this channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go, and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories, judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on your children, pets, family, and your friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.